Did you notice something in the gospel that I wish we were still doing today? In the gospel, in Jesus' time, in the synagogue, after the scriptures were read, someone from the congregation was invited to come out and give the homily. It's too bad we don't have that custom anymore. But that's why I get the big bucks. In the gospel, Jesus is invited to speak. It was the first time he spoke in this synagogue, so the people were wondering, what will he say? The truth is, we never hear what Jesus actually preached. All we hear is the result. And this is the way it's described. The people were spellbound. He taught with authority. Those words are important because it shows the difference between Jesus' words and those of the scribes and the Pharisees and the rabbis, because they taught from what they had learned from others. But Jesus taught from what he had learned from the Father and the Spirit in the hours of prayer that he spent with them. And it was noticeable. Then Mark in his gospel does something dramatic. He does a reverse show and tell. He does a tell and then show. Jesus drives out the unclean spirit, is called, from the man. Why is that so clever of Mark? Because he's actually dramatizing or illustrating or showing what the people had just said or told. He is showing the authority of Jesus, not just in his teaching, but in his actions in driving out the devil. Let's do an instant replay. Notice how the Spirit first shrieked, "I know who you are, Holy One of God." Now you think that Jesus might be happy with a compliment like that, but he wasn't. Instead, it says Jesus rebuked the devil sharply and said, "Be quiet, come out of the man." And after a convulsion, the spirit is sort of shouted out, and the man is clean. Why did Jesus make such a fuss about this? Because there's a power struggle going on here, both symbolically and actually. Symbolically, because among the Jews, to know someone's name was to have power over that person. Remember in the book of Genesis, God gave Adam the power to name all the animals and creatures because God gave Adam the power over those creatures and animals, dominion over them. Here, the devil tries to assert power over Jesus by naming him. "You are the Holy One of God," he says. That's like scoring the first points. But Jesus immediately showed his own authority over the devil and cast him out. Okay, enough instant replay. Let's get back to the game of life. Our lives, our days. What does this tell us about Jesus and you and me today? I think it reminds us that Jesus is still acting in our world today, the same as he was 2,000 years ago. He's still driving out evil, driving out devils, the evil from our lives, the evil from our world. That was one of the main reasons that he came, to overcome evil in our world and the struggles that come in so many forms of evil. But maybe you ask, well, where is he today? We seem to be battling super evils these days, violent evils in the form of ISIS or Boko Haram or the Taliban and other extremists, war and violence and terrorism, like that terrible suicide bombing in Kabul just yesterday. The opioid crisis, the flu epidemic, the immigration impasse, and the heart-rending deportations in families, government shutdowns, congressional impasse, slavery, and human trafficking. Then there are natural evils like the fires and the floods and the mudslides that we have been experiencing in our own country and in other countries. I could go on, but you follow the news. And we haven't even talked about the personal evil and struggles that you have in your own individual lives. So where is Jesus? Where is God in all of these struggles today? Well, in almost every disaster that I have mentioned, we human beings have risen up to help. We human beings have risen up to struggle to overcome the evil. For instance, Ryland Ward, now 6 years old, was among the 20 people who were injured in the deadly mass shooting at the First Baptist Church that killed 26 churchgoers in Sutherland Springs, Texas, last November. Volunteer firefighter Rusty Duncan was checking church pews for victims after the shooting when little Ryan, who was lying under his mother who had died protecting him, reached out and grabbed his pants leg. So Rusty picked up the little boy, ran outside, and rushed him to the hospital. He learned that Ryan was shot 5 times, had lost not only his mother, but 2 of his sisters. So the firemen visited the critical little Ryan constantly, every day, there in the hospital. When Ryland said that he wanted, what he wanted for Christmas was Christmas cards with $1 in them, over 3,000 Christmas cards came flooding into the hospital. Just recently, Ryland began to walk with assistance and is able to go home. So what did Rusty, the volunteer fireman, do? He got the local fire department to take Ryland home in a big red fire truck with a motorcade of other fire trucks and other emergency or law enforcement escorts and more, while people lined the streets of that small city to wave at Ryland and welcome him home. I saw the beautiful story on TV, and maybe some of you did too. That's just one story, but it can be multiplied hundreds and hundreds of times by people who helped others in our recent floods and mudslides and all over the country and all over the world. Wherever there is evil trying to overcome good, there is good people trying to overcome evil. And it's probably happening too in your own lives. In fact, it has to happen in your own lives. For the conflict of Jesus goes on and will continue to go on, overcoming evil till the end of time. That's why today, here in our Eucharist, we will pray, "Deliver us from evil," and we know our prayers will be answered. Amen.